Alex, I spent the first 3 years of my woodworking life trying to build high-end cabinetry on a pair of plastic sawhorses and a hollow core door I found leaning against a dumpster. Every time I tried to saw a 10 on, the whole setup would shimmy like a nervous chihuahua. It was less like craftsmanship and more like wrestling a greased pig.
I've seen the photos, Tiger. That door looked like it had been through a war zone by the time you retired it. But honestly, I think that's where everyone starts. You're so eager to make the thing, the chair, the box, the table, that you forget you need a solid place for the thing to actually sit while you're beating on it.
Exactly. People treat the workbench like it's just another piece of furniture, but it isn't. It's a floor-mounted tool. It's the foundation. If your bench has the structural integrity of a card table, your joinery is going to look like it was done during an earthquake. I finally snapped when a chisel slip almost sent me to the ER because the bench decided to take a stroll across the garage mid-stroke. I realized then that a workbench doesn't need to be pretty, but it absolutely has to be stubborn. It has to refuse to move.
Stubborn is a good word for it. But when you start looking into this, you get hit with a wall of tradition. You've got the Roubo purists, the Paul Sellers laminated top disciples, the English joiners bench fans. It's a lot for someone who just bought their first set of chisels. Where do you actually start without getting lost in the weeds of 18th century French design?
Start with mass, pure, unadulterated weight. I've seen guys spend 3 months sourcing exotic hardwoods for a bench top, but honestly, Paul Sellers has the right idea with the laminated construction. You take common 2x4s, flip them on their edges, and glue them into a giant monolithic slab. It's not about the pedigree of the timber, it's about creating a surface that doesn't know how to vibrate.
Okay, let's talk about that lamination process, because to a beginner, gluing up 24 boards sounds like a nightmare. What's the reality of that glue up? Is it as stressful as it looks?
It's worse if you try to do it all at once. That's the trap. You see people trying to glue 20 boards in one go, and the glue starts setting up on board number 1 while you're still buttering board number 15. It becomes a skating rink of wet PVA. My approach now is to do it in sub-assemblies, glue 3 or 4 boards together into a beam, flatten those, then glue the beams together. It keeps the blood pressure down and the bench top actually flat.
And that brings up the flatness obsession. I see these forum posts where people are using machinist straight edges to check their bench tops to within a thousandth of an inch. How flat does a workbench really need to be? Are we building space shuttles here, or just birdhouses?
If you're chasing a thousandth of an inch on a piece of wood that's going to expand and contract every time a rain cloud passes over your house, you're chasing a ghost. You need it flat enough that your work doesn't rock. If you put a board down and it teeter-totters, you're going to have a bad day. But a slight dip in the middle? Honestly, some of the best furniture in history was built on benches that look like a gentle rolling hill. The key is having a few reference zones that you know are true.
So, weight is king, and flat-ish is the goal. But what about height? I feel like this is the one decision that haunts people. I've seen you hunching over your old bench like the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and it looked painful.
My lower back still sends me a formal complaint every morning for the height of my first bench. There's this old rule of thumb, line the bench up with your wrist bone, but that's total nonsense if you're doing different types of work. If you're doing heavy hand planing, you want it lower so you can get your body weight over the tool. If you're doing fine inlay or dovetails, you want it higher so you aren't squinting at your marks from 3 feet away.
So what's the compromise? Or do we all just need 2 benches? Because my shop is the size of a shoebox, Tiger. I can barely fit a bike in there, let alone 2 massive altars to woodworking.
You build for your most frequent task. For most of us, that's joinery. I like a bench that hits about 2 inches above my wrist. But here's the secret. You can always make a Moxon vise or a bench on bench to bring your work up for the detail stuff. You can't easily make a tall bench shorter without a chainsaw and a lot of regret.
Let's talk about the jewelry, the vices. You can spend $50 or $500. I've seen those quick release ones that cost as much as a used car. Is a fancy vice a luxury, or is it the soul of the bench?
A vise is just a third hand that doesn't complain when you pinch it. You don't need the titanium-plated, laser-guided version. A solid cast iron record-style vise or a simple wooden leg vise will do 99% of the heavy lifting. The mistake I see most often is people mounting them flush with the top, but not thinking about the racking. You know, when you clamp something on one side of the vise and the whole jaw twists like a cheap suit?
Ugh, I hate that. Everything just slides out the moment you touch it with a saw.
Exactly. If you're building your first bench, look into a leg vise. It's just a big board and a screw. It's cheap. It uses the mass of the bench leg for support, and it has more holding power than a frustrated toddler. Plus, there's something deeply satisfying about spinning a big wooden handle to lock a workpiece down. It makes you feel like you're actually doing something.
Okay, so we've got a heavy top, a sensible height, and a vise that doesn't twist. What about the stuff underneath? The shelves, the drawers, the tool wells? I've seen Paul Sellers use that recessed well in the middle of the bench. Is that a stroke of genius or just a place for sawdust to go and die?
It's a polarizing topic. A tool well is essentially a gutter for your chisels. Some people love it because it keeps their tools below the working surface so they don't get knocked off. Me? I'm a flat top guy. I treat my workbench like a dinner table. I don't want a trench in the middle of my spaghetti. If I have a tool well, I just spend half my time cleaning out shavings so I can actually find my marking gauge.
I'm with you. I just fill it with coffee mugs and lost screws. But speaking of the underbench area, storage. Should a first-time builder try to incorporate drawers? Or is that just overcomplicating an already big project?
Keep it simple. A basic shelf is your best friend. It gives you a place to put your heavy power tools, which, bonus points, adds even more mass to the bench. If you build a complex chest of drawers into your first bench, you're going to spend 2 weeks building drawers instead of building the bench. The goal is to get working, not to build a masterpiece of cabinetry just so you have a place to put your hammers.
You mentioned earlier that your first setup was a door on sawhorses. When you finally built your first real bench, what was the one thing that surprised you? The thing you didn't see coming?
How much quieter the shop got. I'm serious. When you're working on a flimsy surface, every hammer blow sounds like a drum solo in a metal trash can. But a heavy bench, it just swallows the sound. It's a dull thump. It changed the whole vibe of the room. It went from a place of chaotic noise to a place of focused work. And the confidence, being able to lean your full weight into a plane and knowing the bench isn't going to skitter away, it changes the way you move. You stop being timid.
It's the difference between fighting your tools and using them. I think a lot of beginners blame their hands for mistakes that are actually being caused by their wobbly work surface.
You hit the nail on the head. If your bench moves an eighth of an inch while you're trying to cut a straight line, your line isn't going to be straight. Period. You could be the reincarnation of a master joiner, but if your foundation is shifty, your work will be too.
So for the person listening who is standing in the middle of their garage, looking at a pile of construction lumber and feeling intimidated, what's the first move? Before the first cut?
Check your lumber. Don't just grab the first wet, sappy boards at the top of the pile at the big box store. Dig through the stack, find the boards that aren't trying to become a propeller, bring them home, let them sit in your shop for a week or two to get used to the humidity, and then, and only then, start your glue up. If you rush the drying process, your beautiful flat bench will look like a Pringle by next Tuesday.
A Pringle bench. That's a mental image I don't need.
It happens. I've built benches that warped so bad I could have used them as a skate ramp. It's all part of the learning curve. But if you take it slow, focus on mass, and don't get hung up on perfection, you'll end up with a partner in the shop that'll last you 30 years.
I think that's the takeaway here. A workbench isn't a trophy, it's a teammate. It's okay if it gets dented. It's okay if you accidentally saw into the top once or twice, or 10 times.
If your workbench doesn't have a few character marks, you aren't working hard enough. My bench top looks like a topographical map of my failures, and I love every inch of it. Each scar is a lesson I don't have to learn again.
Spoken like a man who has definitely sawed into his own tabletop more than once.
More times than I'm willing to admit on a recorded podcast, Alex. More times than I'm willing to admit.
Thanks for the deep dive, Tiger. Next time, I want to hear about that time you tried to use a shop vac as a forge blower.
Oh, that's a story for when we have insurance.